The Indian diaspora in the United States is one of the largest, most successful and wealthiest diasporas in the country. The AIF, the American Indian Foundation, was set up about 10 years ago by Pradeep Kashyap, and I spoke to him when I was in New York recently.
The Indian diaspora today is, we estimate, in excess of 3 million Americans. And by independent measure, it is perhaps one of the highest per capita income diasporas. And it's largely because most of the people from India who are here tend to have at least a bachelor's education, if not a master's education. So education has given them a leg up compared to a lot of other diasporas. AIF started really almost 10 years ago, in fact a little more than 10 years ago, and in fact this year is our 10th anniversary year. When immediately after the big earthquake in January 2001 in Gujarat, India, there was a conversation between President Clinton and the Indian Prime Minister Vajpayee, which resulted in the President going around and getting Americans of Indian descent together to help in the reconstruction work of the earthquake. And that really was the beginning of AIF. There was a lunch arranged at Citibank in February of 2001 where the idea of AI was born. I actually spent 30 years at Citibank personally and got involved in this whole exercise and became a full-time person in April of 2001. I used the title of Executive Director for the first 2 years. I was seconded by Citibank to help set it up, and subsequently I decided to provide my services pro bono and in fact funded my own expenses, which I did till 2008, which is when we thought we had sufficient critical mass to in fact hire professionals to run this place.
And what do you think are the opportunities now facing the engagement of the Indian diaspora? It seems to me as if it's something which has really accelerated since the turn of the century. What do you think of the potential?
That is true. I think in many respects a lot of wealth has been created in the diaspora, definitely since the turn of the century, as you say. And what has happened though, what we have to keep in mind, this is a very competitive space. There are a whole slew of players who either have a Indian organization which then sets up a 501c3 here and goes after the diaspora, or there are local sub-community based, so in other words, you know, for most people in North America, India is one identity, but of course amongst the Indians, there are a lot of sub-identities. India, as you know, is referred to as a subcontinent. So there are a lot of states in India which are the size of a European country. So, you know, you have the Gujaratis and the Tamils and the Punjabis and the Bengalis, and so you know, these are, each identity is the size of a European country. So you know, you have a large number of groups which are subgroups of the Indian subcontinent. So there is a huge competitive space here, and there are a number of players operating here. We like to think that we are perhaps the largest secular platform where people of all backgrounds come together to give in a collective format for development work in India, which is not directed to any region or community, but in fact is a secular in nature.
Do you find that by engaging people here in the Indian diaspora through philanthropy, that leads to other forms of engagement with India?
You know, there are already existing platforms for all sorts of other engagements, but it does build a community. AIF has been a national platform. We don't think of ourselves as a New York organization or a California organization. We are a national organization. So it does facilitate a lot of people across the country to connect and in fact think of themselves as part of a community. And to that extent, AIF has played a significant role.
There is a sense now of global Indianness. Is that a recent phenomenon?
The global Indian as a phenomenon is somewhat recent, and I think it has been, it has sort of come about more because of the visible success of Indians, whether it is in the entrepreneurial space in Silicon Valley or in the corporate space in the global five, the Fortune 500 companies. So yes, it is a relatively recent phenomenon, and it has a lot to do with the global success of the Indian.
And if you look into your crystal ball, Kash, 10 years from now, where do you see all this going?
I think a lot needs to be done. I think in India's history, a lot of major positive change in the country has been facilitated by Indians overseas who cared very deeply for India. And I think there is room for that to happen all over again. I think positive change in India can be triggered by people outside India who care deeply for India. Whether it is addressing this whole issue of governance that is currently very hot in India, or any series of economic or social issues in India.
And the role of government in all this, do you think they should be implementers or facilitators, or how should you interact with them?
I certainly think they should be facilitators. I think trying to implement things, sadly, they say India had great success in the tech field only because the government didn't know it existed. I mean, if the government gets involved, there's likely to be, it won't be as successful, is my view. I think at best they should be facilitators.